in your notes, despite the fact I've said that twice in a row. I mean homework. That's what I'm really interested in. That you guys are doing the prep work. So, anyways, okay. So let's have a look at this, shall we? So the Mughal Empire, right? First and foremost, let's talk geographic area, because if you've noticed, we've been hitting a different geographic area in Asia each chapter. So the first one was in Turkey. The second one was modern-day Iran. Now we're moving farther east into India. So we're kind of covering this whole area of South and Southwest Asia, and even Western Asia, even in Europe. And the Mughal Empire the name makes sense when you put it into perspective, right? Because Mughal is kind of a weird thing, but it comes from the word Mongol, as in Mongolians, as in the followers of Genghis Khan and his successors, who spread this massive land empire all across Asia. They established this sort of series of different kingdoms throughout the world. And trying to emulate him, we had a conqueror by the name of Timur the Lame, which sounds familiar to you all, yes? Yeah. Who went on creating this giant empire out of Shahrazad, the Green City. His son, who's named Shah Rukh, ended up establishing a Turkish kingdom in India that later was going to be established into the Mughal Empire. But originally it was called the Delhi Sultanate. And basically it was a country in only the loosest sense of the word. It was really a collection of Turkish warlords all sort of vying for control. And it lasted a good long while. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's between the 13th and the 16th centuries. That's 300 years of history. So keep that in mind. It's older than the United States is. So eventually, one guy is going to be able to start establishing an empire. That dude's name is Babur. Babur, who was pretty much a brilliant general in his usage of tactics. Again, he's going to use a combination of this sort of traditional Turkish or Mongolic cavalry, as well as the sort of more traditional foot soldiers, in order to conquer large portions of the northern part of India. In fact, he's so famous that he ended up the basis, to some extent, of a children's book. You guys ever remember reading stories with this guy in it? Babar comes from Babur. Yeah, this TV show as well. But this is the real Babur, right? And again, he sets up this sort of Islamic state in the northern portion of India. Which let me point out something about this. So I don't know if you guys have been following stuff in the news about ISIS and the Islamic State and all that kind of thing. If you guys have been doing that, and you'll know that sometimes they refer to it as a caliphate. So here's the deal. Why are they using these words and why are they so crazy, right? I mean, we could spend a lot of time talking about. Let's address the historical aspect of this. Remember how yesterday we were talking about how the Safavids were trying to be really Persian, and how we in our country have a lot of Roman symbolism? Basically, whenever you create a kingdom, the first thing you have to really do about other than this ruling is establishing legitimacy, trying to prove to the other nations that you have a right to exist. Because the thing is, for much of history, really even today, it's a pretty bloodthirsty world out there. And other empires will take moments of weakness as a sign to go and conquer other nations. So you have to sort of prove that you deserve to be in charge, and one of the most basic ways of doing that is tying yourself historically to people who ruled an area before. So you're like, well, we're just their descendants, right? So by calling themselves a caliphate, they're not only declaring that they're an Islamic empire, but they're also trying to tie themselves back to history. So they're trying to earn legitimacy. Now that doesn't always work, obviously, but that's what they're going for. So what we're going to see is a similar type situation referring to the Mughal dynasty. Although to be fair, that's really more of the Hindu word for it, because one of the things we also have to understand is India, along with China, are the principal cultural hearts for this area of the world. The theology from India dramatically influenced the rest of Asia, and indeed throughout the world. Buddhism, Hinduism, as well as sort of these different philosophies, if you will, became very widespread. In fact, Buddhism became one of the most practiced religions in Asia because of this. Now, that being said, there's also Muslims and Christians and all these other groups here. And so what we're going to have is a lot of sort of animosity between them. So, again, what we're going to see is whenever you have religious tolerance, whenever you have an emperor who is promoting this sense of harmony and trying to dissuade everybody from fighting based on religion, that's when you tend to have sort of these golden ages arrive. Case in point, Akbar. Akbar, I think is how you're supposed to pronounce his name. I could be wrong. But that's what I'm going to go with. So Akbar, he conquered most of what we think of as India today. He was able to do so by using artillery, which, let me take a moment and explain what I mean by the word gun. Because if I say the word gun, most of you guys probably imagine in your head like a pistol or maybe a rifle or a shotgun or something like that. But historically, the word gun means cannon, right? So whenever you read that a ship of the line had 130 guns, they mean 130 cannons. Yeah, on basically 75 on each side. Which the amount of devastation that can level is just unbelievable. Now, let me explain something about artillery, field guns, right? Most of you probably also think when I say cannon, think like cannonball, right? Like a hunk of metal and you shove down the barrel and fires it. There's something that is true. Those are really good at knocking down walls because it takes all the force of the cannon and puts it in one space, blowing a hole in something. But what if we're facing an army? Like we've got an army on that side, we've got an army on this side, we're going to shoot them with our guns. Cannonballs aren't really going to do much. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're going to ruin someone's day if they hit them, but you got to hit them, right? And that's kind of hard to do. So they had all kinds of other ways of using cannons against troops. One of them is the use of grape shot. Now, imagine 100 steel balls the size of a marble. Like, you know those big marbles you use, like to mash all the other marbles? Like 100 of those fired at a cannon at a speed of about 900 feet per second. What would that do to somebody? Have you guys ever watched Mythbusters? They actually had one of those cannons and fired what's called grape shot out of it. And they fired it at a pig carcass, like you buy from the butcher, and it just shredded. It just turned into just like just powder, basically. It's wet, gross. It looked like hamburger, basically. It's gross. That was one cannon, right? Imagine 100 cannons fired, right? Now we can see the damage we can do to the enemy troops. Another great thing is we can make shells that explode. So it's not just a cannonball, it's a bomb, right? We lob that sucker all the way over there, and then it explodes and it gets there, and oh man, the devastation, right? Now, don't get me wrong, cannons have their weaknesses as well. They're heavy, they're slow, like we saw, if you remember, with Suleiman, whenever he was trying to march to attack Belgrade, and he got bogged down because it was really heavy. The other thing is they're really susceptible to cavalry. Because if a cavalryman can come to the sides, it's really hard to reposition the cannon, and they can just cut down the guys actually arming the cannon. Another trick that was used in warfare a lot was spiking the cannons. Basically, you get a bunch of your guys to sneak into the enemy encampment at night, and they would go through the cannons. They take these nails that are about yay big, made of brass, and they would hammer them in the touch holes on the top of the cannon. The touch holes are where you put the fire to ignite the gunpowder. So if there's a spike in the way, you can't actually fire it until you get a drill to drill it out. So by the time that they get the cannons in position and notice what's happened, it's too late. They're not going to be able to use their cannons in the fight. So cannons, when useful, were really useful, but you had to know how to use them. Akbar did, right? So he was able to conquer most of India, not only because of cannons, but also his policies. You see, traditionally speaking, here's how it goes. Your army defeats another army, right? You immediately execute all of their generals. Right? Makes sense. That way, those generals won't break free and then raise a rebellion against us, and we got it under control. Well, Akbar did something different. He was like, you did a really good job fighting me. I want to hire you. And he gave them positions and power and wealth, so they're like, I actually like this job better than my old one. So, I'm going to go with this guy. He's pretty all right. And so not only did he win the loyalty of the generals, he would also win the loyalty of all of their men. Because they followed the generals, right? So he was able to do this and gather a large following to him. He promoted religious tolerance. There was a much hated tax on all non-Muslims. Basically, if you weren't a Muslim, you had to pay a special tax in order to practice your religion. He got rid of that. And in fact, he encouraged all people to sort of work together. He reformed the government. That's the second thing we see a lot with these golden ages. Reforming the government, like with Suleiman, reforming the law. In this case, he made taxes easier to pay. He didn't change the taxes, really. He just made them easier to pay. And here's the thing, is you have to understand how wonderfully lazy human beings are, right? Human beings do a lot of illegal stuff, not because of malice and not because they lack option. Well, actually, it is because they lack options. It's they lack a good way of going about things. For instance, do you guys know what the most pirated TV show in history was? It was often the illegally downloaded one. It was Game of Thrones. You know why? The only way to buy it was to have a Showtime subscription. That doesn't work if you don't have a television. You know, like for instance, if you have someone who's living and basically only watching Netflix and stuff like that, they're willing to buy a service to watch it, but they didn't offer it. As soon as they did, people started paying for it. Or an even better example is music, right? If you want to listen to one specific song right now, how long do you think it would take you to get it? How would you do it? Okay, so you got all kinds of options, right? You got all kinds of options to legally listen to stuff, right? YouTube is kind of questionable, but here's the thing: is what I've noticed happening a lot more is companies are like, yeah, you can listen to it if you watch this commercial, right? So that means they're getting revenue. You're paying for it. You're just not paying with it with cash. You're paying with it with your time watching the commercials, right? So this is one of those type of examples. It's actually become so easy to get legal music that most people will just do it legally. I mean, iTunes revolutionized music because you could easily buy songs that you wanted. It used to be you had to buy a CD or a tape or even a record and then hope you liked all the songs on it, which often they didn't. I remember a number of times buying a CD for one song. That's one song for $15. You know? So you can see why when iTunes is like, it'll be $1, people are like, okay. That's became easier to pay for it than it was to download it illegally. So that's what we're talking about here. By making the taxes easier to pay, people were more likely to pay them and not risk, getting arrested for tax evasion. Basically, the easier you make it to follow the law, the more likely people are going to. So that's what he did. He also did away with feudalism. We have to understand something about feudalism. It was sort of like slavery. I mean, it's different, but it's pretty similar, right? Because whereas As a serf, you have slightly more rights than a slave, but it's not by much. By getting rid of that, he also incentivized people to work harder. So long story short, he did a lot of good things, right? That's Akbar, by the way. That's Akbar. So one of the things I think is kind of interesting about this picture of him, first off, you guys see what he's got on his arm there? It's a doping falcon. Right, you guys know what falconry is? Okay. Falconry is where you hunt with a falcon. Falcon, a bird of prey. So like, we're gonna go get them. I mean, it's basically like modern equivalent, I think, would be if you strapped a gun to a drone and then went hunting animals with it. Which is kind of terrifying on one hand, but also really kind of awesome on the other. Yeah, falconry was a favorite pastime of the nobility, actually throughout the world. It's weird. I actually remember when I was at St. X, one of the brothers who was my advisor, or whatever you call it, our counselor there, his hobby was falconry. Oh my God. Like, he had a falcon that was like his buddy, and they went hunting on the weekend. It's like, I remember like seeing like in his office like a picture of him and a falcon. Like, really? Yeah, still a thing. Anywho, but that's why the head falconer, the guy who took care of your falcons, and the guy who kind of established these hunts and everything like that, was kind of an important position. It was a prestigious position. You guys remember Ibrahim, Suleiman's best bud, the guy who was trusting him? You remember what his first title was? Falconer to the Sultan. So that's, again, kind of a big deal. And this just kind of shows you, again, going falconing and this sort of thing, it was kind of a big deal. And hunting was a big part of sort of noble society. It wasn't necessarily just about getting meat, it was all kinds of stuff. All right, so after Akbar, we're going to have a series of bad rulers. First up is Jahangir, excuse me. He basically was like, yeah, I don't really want to rule, so I'm going to make my wife do it, you know. So basically like a typical guy, right? His wife, Nur Jahan, was really the queen, so to speak. And while she was definitely a strong ruler, she was pretty religiously intolerant. Particularly, there was a conflict that erupted between the Sikhs and the Muslims. And basically, they ended up losing because the Sikhs didn't have any support from the Hindus. Sikhism and Hinduism are different. They're different faiths. One important aspect of Sikhism is military service. Even today, modern Sikhs, there's a big push to help others, to serve others, to defend others. And so this sort of tradition kind of came to blows against the oppression that they were facing. They fought back, which resulted in this sort of civil war. The things were bad. Shah Jahan, believe it or not, was even worse. First off, if anyone opposed him politically, he just had him assassinated. So he was pretty ruthless. The other thing is, he was very, very narcissistic. You guys know what that word means, narcissism? It means self-lover. He loves himself. In particular, he basically bankrupted his country for about 30 years, if I remember correctly, to build one building, which was going to become a tomb for his favorite wife, which was his third wife. That building, of course, is probably the most well-known building in India, the Taj Mahal, right? So that's just a tomb for one person. It's just so romantic, right? You know, pain and suffering for 30 years just because he loves someone that much, right? By the way, after his people had suffered and it was terrible and they had finished it, they were like, okay, now we can stop. We can just enjoy normal life again. He said, yeah, no, we're going to build a second one. Only this one's going to be black. You know, that way we have the whole white and black thing. You know what I mean? It'll be awesome. Needless to say, the people were like, no. And his son actually took over, had his father imprisoned, and basically kept him in prison until he died. And made certain that the prison actually had a nice window so you could see the Taj Mahal from it. So, yeah, fun times were had by none. His son was named Aurangzeb. He basically was, again, a religious tyrant. forcing huge taxes on the Hindu population, which is kind of a big deal considering the majority of Indians were Hindus. And so basically from that point on, the empire starts to weaken and collapse. It's this weakened empire that Britain is going to take advantage of and basically start carving out chunks of it for themselves. By the 19th century, India is part of the British Empire. So basically, this weakness, this division caused by religion, is what caused these countries to fall apart. That's an important thing to note. Whenever you have unity, you have strength. Whenever you have division, you have collapse. So, I'm actually already recording it, so you should be good to go. Yeah, I actually had to start over because I was like, oh, I already know that. But yes, I did remember today, so that will be on YouTube a little bit later. But it's an important distinction. Again, if we look at three different examples in history, we look at the Ottomans, we look at the Safavids, and we look at the Mughals, each time we have this sort of golden age, this ruler who's considered the best, they always reform the government to be more functional and promote religious tolerance. It's whenever folks start getting away from that that we have things starting to fall apart. But anyways. All right, so that's it for this section. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and I'm going to go ahead and have a look-see at what the poll says. I suppose we can just do that real quick. All righty. Let me refresh it. Friday it is. All right. So the quiz is Friday.